shaggy German shepherd falls into the darkness of his kennel, his sunken eyes staring into nothingness. Miles away, a man stumbles through the snow, clutching a trembling, empty leash in his hand. A frayed collar hides the thread that binds their pasts together, waiting to be untied. Ringo, as the faded collar once called him, lay motionless in the farthest kennel of Mountain Ridge Animal Shelter. The German shepherd's matted fur clung to his bony frame, a dull grey-brown mess that hadn't seen a brush in years. His collar, frayed and chewed, dangled loosely around his neck, the name scratched into the leather, barely legible after 9 hard years. The wind howled outside, rattling the metal gate, but Ringo didn't flinch. He didn't even lift his head. His eyes stared at nothing, empty, distant, like a soul that had given up long ago. The other dogs barked and paced in their cages, their voices sharp against the cold, but Ringo stayed still. A visitor's boots crunched on the icy gravel nearby, and a chorus of yips erupted down the row. Still, he didn't move. He just lay there, ribs rising and falling in shallow breaths, waiting for something no one could name. "They say he's been here too long," whispered Sarah, one of the shelter workers, as she swept the walkway. She glanced at Ringo's kennel, her broom pausing mid-stroke. 9 years old, no chip, no papers. Probably a military dog the way he holds himself. Stiff, like he's still on duty, but who knows? Her co-worker, Mike, nodded grimly, tossing a bale of hay into the storage shed. Time's almost up for him. If no one takes him soon, well, you know the rules. Sarah sighed, her breath fogging in the frigid air. Shame, though. He's got a look, like he's seen things. 60 miles away, Bruce Kane limped along a snowy trail on the outskirts of Denver, his cane sinking into the powder with every step. Beside him, Cass playing with dry leaves. The cold bit at Bruce's scarred leg, a souvenir from his days training dogs for the army, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, trapped 5 years back in a memory he couldn't shake. Ringo! Bruce's voice had cracked that day, shouting over the roar of gunfire and the choking smoke. The leash had slipped from his hand, slick with sweat and blood, and Ringo's barks faded into the chaos as he bolted toward the enemy line. Bruce had screamed until his throat burned, but the dog never came back. The army called it a loss, they said. Bruce didn't buy it. He'd searched shelters, posted flyers, even driven through back roads calling Ringo's name into the night. Nothing. 5 years and the guilt still gnawed at him, a dull ache deeper than the cold in his bones. "Dad, can we go to the park tomorrow?" Cass's voice snapped him out of it. She tilted her head, her brown eyes bright despite the grey sky. Bruce forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, kiddo. We'll see what the day brings." Cass grinned, oblivious to the weight her father carried. She tugged at his sleeve, her small voice insistent. "Please, I want to see the dogs there. Maybe they'll play with me." Bruce nodded, his thoughts drifting back to Ringo. His partner, his shadow, the one he'd let slip away. Tomorrow, he thought. Maybe a walk would quiet the ghosts. The park was a rare ray of life in the winter gloom, the sky opening to a pale blue that made Cass squeal with delight. Bruce followed her, watching his daughter silently, his breath coming in short gasps as he walked over the rough ground. Around them, dogs scampered across the snow-covered lawn, Labradors chasing tennis balls, a scruffy mongrel tugging on its leash, its tail wagging like a metronome. Cass clapped her hands, laughter ringing out. "Look, Dad, that one's running so fast." Bruce nodded, his eyes scanning the landscape, but his heart was heavy, tied to a past he couldn't escape. Then he saw it. A German shepherd, tied to a twisted oak tree near the picnic table. The dog stood rigid, its fur a tangle of dirt and thorns, a tattered collar dangling around its neck. Bruce stopped mid-step, his stick digging into the snow. Something about the way it held itself, shoulders squared, head bowed low, sent a flutter in his chest. He squinted, saw a faint scar running down its left side, pale against the tangled fur. His pulse quickened. It couldn't be. A man in an old coat sat on a nearby bench, scrolling through his phone, a leash lazily wrapped around his wrist. Bruce cleared his throat, stepping closer. "Hey, is that your dog?" The man looked up, scratching his stubbled chin. No, not really. I found him wandering a few years ago. Kept him, but I couldn't afford to keep him anymore. The shelter was full, so I thought I'd try here, see if anyone wanted him. Bruce's gaze flicked to the collar, the leather cracked and discolored. He hunched over, ignoring the pain in his leg, and tilted his head to read. The letters were faint, blurred, but he could see the R and the jagged O at the end. He held his breath. "Ringo?" he whispered, barely audible. The dog's head jerked, its ears twitching. Those dull, lifeless eyes he'd last seen in a kennel 60 miles away, glimmered with something sharp and alive. Its nose quivered, sniffing the air, and a low whine escaped its throat. Its tail, limp a moment ago, flopped weakly to the ground. "Daddy, it knows you!" Cass's voice rang out, high and clear. She leaned forward in her chair, grinning. Bruce's hands shook as he reached out, stroked the dog's muzzle. It pressed against his palm, warm and real. Tears stung, spilling before he could stop them. "Ringo, is that you?" The man on the bench blinked, startled. "You know this mongrel?" Bruce didn't answer, just dug into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled wad of bills, all he had on him. "I'll take him." Now the man shrugged, pocketing the money and untying the leash. "All yours, man. Good luck. He's almost dead anyway." Bruce didn't care. He knelt down, wrapping his arms around Ringo's thin neck, the familiar weight of that head on his chest breaking something loose inside him. "You're alive," he whispered hoarsely. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Cass moved closer, her small hand resting on Ringo's back, and asked her dad, "Is this the brave Ringo you always told me about?" Bruce nodded slightly. Cass laughed happily. "We're a family now, aren't we, Dad?" Bruce just wiping his face with his sleeve and gently stroked Cass's hair. The three of them headed home, Bruce limping, Cass beaming, and Ringo following behind, their steps slow but steady. For the first time in years, a glimmer of hope flickered in Bruce's chest, though the darkness remained. Ringo was back, but he looked like he'd been through hell to get here. Bruce's small house on the edge of Denver felt different now, like it had finally woken up from a long, grey sleep. The living room, once cluttered with old newspapers and unopened mail, now had a corner cleared out for Ringo, a folded blanket tucked against the wall, a chipped water bowl beside it. Bruce knelt there the first morning, a pair of grooming shears in hand. Ringo sat still as he snipped away the worst of the tangles, clumps of filthy fur falling to the floor. The dog's ribs stuck out too sharp under his touch, but Bruce kept going, brushing, washing, even fastening a new collar, black and sturdy, around Ringo's neck. "There you go, buddy," he said softly, stepping back. Ringo tilted his head, looking almost like a dog again. Later that day, Bruce tested something. He stood in the cramped backyard, snow crunching under his boots, and clapped once. "Sit!" Ringo's haunches dropped instantly, precise as a soldier snapping to attention. "Stay!" The dog froze, eyes locked on Bruce, not even twitching as a gust whipped through the bare trees. "Down!" Ringo eased onto his belly, slow but steady, like the command had been carved into his bones. Bruce's throat tightened. "You haven't forgotten a damn thing, have you?" Cass rolled out onto the porch and giggled. "He's so smart, Dad. Can I try?" She tossed a tennis ball, her throw wobbly but eager. Ringo lumbered after it, jaws closing gently around the fuzzy green sphere before he plodded back and dropped it at her feet. "Good boy," she cheered, clapping like it was the best show she'd ever seen. Cass took to Ringo like he'd always been there. By afternoon, she'd parked her wheelchair by the couch, chattering away while he sprawled beside her. "You like stories, huh? Okay, once there was this dragon who lived in the mountains." Her voice danced through the room, bright and unbroken, and Ringo's ears flicked with every word. Bruce watched from the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It had been years since he'd felt this. Something close to peace, like a piece of himself, had clicked back into place. That night, though, the quiet got heavy. Bruce sat at the table, a cup of coffee gone cold in his hands, and his mind slipped back. He saw Ringo at 20 months old, all gangly legs and sharp barks, tearing through obstacle courses at the base in Fort Carson. He remembered the first mission. Ringo sniffing out a buried IED, tail wagging like it was a game, while Bruce's heart pounded behind his vest. They'd run dozens after that, a team so tight Bruce swore he could feel Ringo's thoughts through the leash. How the hell had he survived out there? 5 years. Alone, scavenging, dodging cars, or worse. Bruce's grip tightened on the mug. I should have looked harder, he muttered, the old guilt flaring up. He'd stopped too soon, let the army's word bury his hope. What kind of handler gave up like that? The creak of the floorboards pulled him out of it. Ringo padded in from the living room, nails clicking softly, and settled by the fireplace. The glow caught his fur, cleaner now, and for the first time since they brought him home, he curled up tight and slept. Really slept, chest rising slow and deep. Bruce watched him, the knot in his gut loosening just a fraction. "Welcome home, soldier," he whispered, leaning back in his chair. The warmth of the fire spread through the room, but a shadow lingered in his mind. Ringo was tougher than he'd ever imagined, but Bruce couldn't shake the feeling that those lost years had left scars he couldn't see. The local market was bustling with late winter energy, a patchwork of stalls spilling out under a sky that had finally shed its grey. Bruce led Cass through the crowd, Ringo walking beside him on a newly attached leash. Vendors hawked steaming cider and hand-knitted scarves, their voices mingling with the chatter of shoppers shaking off the stifling feeling. The air smelled of cinnamon and damp earth, the last of the snow melting into puddles at their feet. Cass craned her neck, pointing to a table piled high with wooden toys. "Daddy, can we get one, for Ringo to chew on?" Bruce chuckled, the sound hoarse but genuine. "Maybe, kid. Let's see if he's interested." They stopped at a beef jerky stand when it happened. A scream cut through the noise. A woman's voice, high-pitched and panicked. "He's got my son!" Everyone turned, and Bruce whirled, his stick skidding in the mud. Near the edge of the market, a man in a hooded cloak pinned a boy, perhaps 10, to a stack of crates. A knife glinted at the child's throat, the blade catching the faint sunlight. The crowd staggered back, gasps spreading outward, but no one moved closer. The man growled, "Back off, or he's done for!" Bruce's stomach dropped, old instincts kicking in fiercely. Beside him, Ringo stiffened, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. His ears pricked up, his eyes narrowed to slits, as if he'd flipped a switch Bruce hadn't felt in years. "Ringo, hold on," Bruce muttered, his grip tightening on the leash, but the dog's muscles tightened, ready to spring. The boy whined, his small hands clawing at the arms around his neck. Bruce's mind raced. His legs wouldn't let him lunge, not like before, but he couldn't just stand there. Then he understood. "Ringo, take it." The command came sharp and clear, and Ringo was like a bullet. Age didn't matter. His legs shook, snow spraying behind him, and he leapt, teeth clamping down on the man's wrist. The knife fell to the ground as the man howled, staggering back. Ringo held on, growling through his hands, clamping down until the man collapsed, cursing and writhing. Bruce lurched forward, adrenaline overwhelming the pain in his legs. He dropped the bat, grabbed the man's other arm and twisted it with a move he hadn't used since he'd been in the army. His knee pressed down on the man's chest, shaking but sure, while Ringo kept his knife hand locked. "Get down!" Bruce growled, his voice low and steady. A few seconds later, boots pounded. 2 cops pushed through the crowd, shouting orders. They cuffed the man, dragging him away as he spat threats into the air. The boy struggled free, crying as he ran to his mother, who held him as if she'd never let go. But Ringo didn't follow Bruce back. Instead, he limped, blood streaking his foreleg where the knife had grazed. Still, he stood tall, chest heaving, eyes fixed on Bruce as if reporting for duty. Cass ran over, tears streaming down her face. "Ringo, you're so brave," she cried, throwing her arms around his neck. The dog leaned against her, trembling now, the fight gone. Bruce knelt down, rubbing the wound. Shallow but still bleeding. "You never left me, did you?" he said, his voice choked as he pulled Ringo close. The crowd erupted in applause, strangers calling out praise, but Bruce barely heard. All he saw was his dog, beaten but unbroken. The police dragged the man away, the boy safe in his mother's arms. Bruce picked up the stick, wiped his eyes and turned to Cass. "We have to get him to the vet, now." She nodded, still sniffling, and they hurried off, Ringo limping between them. Pride swelled in Bruce's chest, raw and raw, but fear gnawed at the edges. Ringo had given his all. Again. and Bruce wasn't sure how much more he could give. The vet's office smelled of antiseptic and wet fur, a stark white room humming with quiet tension. Bruce sat on a metal bench, his hands clasped tight, while Cass fidgeted beside him, her wheelchair creaking every time she shifted. Ringo was behind the swinging doors, out of sight, and the wait stretched on. 10 minutes, then 20. Bruce's leg throbbed, but he didn't care. All he could think about was that blood-streaked fur and those steady eyes looking up at him. Finally, the vet stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. "He's stable," she said, voice calm but firm. "The cut's deep and he's old. Recovery's going to be slow, but he's a fighter. You can see him now." Bruce exhaled a shaky breath he hadn't known he was holding, and Cass grabbed his arm. "Told you, Dad. He's tough." They found Ringo on a padded table, his leg wrapped in clean bandages, an IV line taped to his side. He lifted his head as they came in, tail thumping once against the surface. Bruce ran a hand along his back, feeling the warmth under his fingers. "You scared me, you old mutt," he murmured, and Cass leaned close, whispering, "You're the best, Ringo." The vet smiled faintly. "He'll need rest, meds, the works, but he'll pull through." Bruce nodded, already planning the quiet days ahead. A week later, the boy's family showed up at the house. The kid, Tommy, his mum called him, held a small box, his eyes still wide from that day at the market. His mother, a wiry woman with tired lines on her face, handed Bruce a new collar, leather polished with Ringo Hero etched in bold letters. "We can't thank you enough," she said, voice cracking. "He saved my boy." Tommy stepped forward, shy but determined, and opened the box. A batch of homemade biscuits shaped like bones. "For Ringo," he mumbled. Cass beamed, taking the gift. "He'll love these. Wait till you hear how he jumped that guy." She launched into the story, arms waving, and Tommy grinned, the fear fading from his face. Bruce watched, a lump in his throat, and scratched Ringo's ears as the dog sniffed the air. Spring crept in, slow and steady. Ringo healed, his steps growing surer each day, though he'd never run like he used to. Bruce kept him close, short walks to the mailbox, evenings by the TV, with Cass reading aloud from her latest library book. Ringo would settle at her side, eyes half closed, like he was guarding her even in sleep. At night, he'd curl up by Bruce's bed, a silent shadow breathing soft and even. It hit Bruce then. Ringo hadn't just saved Tommy. He had pulled Bruce out of a hole he'd been sinking in for years, patched up a family that had been fraying at the edges. One morning, Bruce caught himself laughing, really laughing, at Cassie's terrible dog puns, and it felt like breathing again. By April, the snow was gone, replaced by green shoots poking through the yard. Bruce sat on the porch steps, coffee in hand, with Cass beside him, sketching the hills. Ringo sprawled out, head resting on Bruce's foot, the sun warming his fur. "Thanks for coming back, Ringo," Bruce said quietly, almost to himself. The dog's eyes met his, clear, calm, content. And for once, Bruce didn't see ghosts in them, just peace. The three of them sat there, a little unit against the world, and as the light stretched over the hills, Bruce knew they'd made it through.